This tutorial is for 3rd grade, Module 2, Lesson 17. In this lesson, we're going to look at estimating sums. The directions say round each addend to the nearest hundred and find the estimated sums. For example, I have the problem 451 plus 253. The first thing I'm going to do is round each of these numbers to the nearest hundred. The number 451 has 4 hundreds, so it's going to fall between 400 and 500. The midpoint would be 450. Since my number falls after the midpoint, we'll round that up to 500. In the next number, I have 253. I have 2 hundreds, so my answer will fall between 200 and 300, with the midpoint being 250. This number also falls after the midpoint, so we will round that up to 300. That means my estimated sum is 800. Now let's find the real answer to this problem, and I'll do that using partial sums. I have 451 plus 253. I'll start by adding my hundreds. 400 and 200 is 600. 50 and 50 is 100. 1 and 3 is 4. So my final answer here is 704. And you can see how that compares to my estimated answer. Now let's look at the next example. I have 451 again, and this one would round to 500, just like it did in our first problem. Now I have 249. Well, that falls between 200 and 300, and the midpoint is 250. So 249 falls below the midpoint, which means it will round down to 200. Here my estimated answer is 700, because 500 plus 200 equals 700. Now let's find the sum of these two numbers. I have 451 plus 249. 400 and 200 is 600. 50 and 40 is 90. 1 and 9 is 10. Combine those, and I get an answer of 700. And you can see how that compares to my estimated answer. And finally, we have 448 plus 249. 448 would round down to 400 because it falls between 400 and 500, which has a midpoint of 450. 448 is below the midpoint, so that rounds to 400. 249 falls between 200 and 300. The midpoint is 250. 249 falls below the midpoint, so that rounds down to 200. Add these numbers to get my estimated sum. 400 plus 200 is 600. Now let's find the real answer. 448 plus 249. 400 plus 200 is 600. 40 plus 40 is 80. 8 plus 9 is 17. We have 7, 8 plus 1 would be 9, and 6. So we have 697 as our final answer. Now this question says circle the estimated sum that is closest to its real sum. If you look at the first problem, the real sum was 704. Our estimated answer was 800. Those are pretty far apart. In our third problem, our estimation was 600. The real sum was 697. Those are pretty far apart. In our middle problem, our estimation was 700. Our real sum was 700. So here, in this problem, is where our estimated sum was closest to our real sum. Now, why is that? Well, if you notice in the first problem, both of our numbers rounded up when we estimated them. And that means our estimated sum was a lot higher than the real sum. In the third problem, both of our numbers rounded down. And that meant that our estimated sum was a lot less than the real sum. In the middle problem, one number rounded up, the other number rounded down. That gave us an estimation that was closest to the real sum. The next question says, Janet watched a movie that is 94 minutes long on Friday night. She watched a movie that is 151 minutes long on Saturday night. Decide how to round the minutes, then estimate the total minutes Janet watched movies on Friday and Saturday. Well, I'm going to round my first number 94 to the nearest 10, since the highest place value is 10. 94 would fall between 90 and 100, with a midpoint being of 95. Since 94 falls below the midpoint, we'll round that down to 90. Since I rounded that one to the nearest 10, I'm also going to round the next number to the nearest 10. 151 has 15 tens. It falls between 150 and 160, with the midpoint being 155. This falls below the midpoint, so I'll round it to 150. Now my estimated sum then is 90 plus 150. I'm going to think of the 150 as being 10 and 140. I can make 100 here, so 100 plus 140 is 240 minutes. So that's my estimated answer. Now let's find the real answer. We have 151 plus 94. I'm going to use partial sums again, so we have 100. 50 plus 90 is 140. 1 plus 4 is 5. Add those, I get 5, 4, 2. So the real amount of time that Janet spends watching the movies is 245 minutes, which is pretty close to our estimated time. The last question says, Sadie, a bear at the zoo, weighs 182 kilograms. Her cub weighs 74 kilograms. Estimate the total weight of Sadie and her cub using whatever method you think best. So Sadie weighs 182 kilograms and her cub weighs 74 kilograms. I think I'll round both of these to the nearest 10 again, since the cub only has values into the tens place. We'll start with Sadie. If I'm rounding to the nearest 10, well, 182 has 18 groups of 10, so this would fall between 180 and 190, the midpoint being 185. 182 falls below the midpoint, so we'll round that to 180. 74 falls between 70 and 80, with the midpoint being 75. Since 74 falls below the midpoint, we'll round down to 70. Now we'll add these two numbers, 180 plus 70. I'm going to think of 70 as 20 and 50. That way I can combine 180 and 20 to get 200 and then add 50 more. So my estimated answer is 250 kilograms. Part B says, what is the actual weight of Sadie and her cub? Model the problem with a tape diagram. So we'll show Sadie and her tape, and we'll label that 182 kilograms. And then we'll show her cub, which is going to be a smaller tape, as 74 kilograms. And the question is, how much do they weigh together? We'll add 182 plus 74. We have 100, 80 and 70 is 150, 2 and 4 is 6. I have 6 ones, 5 tens, and 200. So our real answer is 256 kilograms compared to that estimated answer of 250 kilograms, which is pretty close.